This is what a triumphal entry is supposed to look like as far as people in the Roman Empire are concerned. Now, for contrast, this is Jesus. Notice the palm branches again.
Where is he now? He's just...
Oops. Excuse me. Get that focus again. So you'll see in both of those triumphal entries, both the Roman Emperor and Jesus, everybody's waving palm branches. Have you ever seen anybody waving palm branches in this country? Does anybody know what the significance of waving a palm branch is, given that the Romans were doing it and the people of Jerusalem were doing it? Anybody happen to know? This coin is a coin of Emperor Hadrian, and you'll see the figure on the left is victory and waving a palm branch. A palm branch was a symbol of victory. So if you waved a palm branch at somebody, that would be like, you're the victor, you're the big cheese, you're the person who's won. And because a military victory would often mean the end of a war and that peace would come, the palm branch also began to be seen also as a symbol of peace, the peace that would come after a war ended. So a palm branch is what you wave when your victorious king comes home to the city. Now, we saw with the Roman guy, he had his chariot and 4 horses. He looked like the big cheese, didn't he? Jesus chooses a donkey. Why a donkey? Why not a war horse? Why not a chariot with 4 horses? Well, Jesus deliberately chooses to find and ride a donkey in order to fulfill a specific prophecy by the prophet Zechariah. So this is from Zechariah, which is in the Old Testament. And Zechariah says, and he's predicting the future here, "Rejoice greatly, daughter of Zion." Zion means Jerusalem. "Rejoice greatly, shout, daughter of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." Everybody would know this prophecy. Everybody in Jerusalem would know it. Jesus knows it, and Jesus has specifically chosen a donkey to echo this prophecy. So when the people of Jerusalem are waving their palm branches as Jesus arrives, what they're saying is they recognize him as this king that Zechariah has spoke about. Therefore, they recognize that Jesus is the chosen one of God, the Messiah as they called him. But Jesus is saying more than just, "I'm the king" here. He's also talking about what kind of king Jesus is going to be. You'll see that immediately afterwards, the prophecy says that God will take away the chariots. Ephraim is part of Israel. And the war horses will be taken away from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be broken. All the weapons are going to disappear and be taken away. That the coming king will bring peace to the nations. So not just peace to Judea, Israel, but peace to all nations. Jesus is signaling that he's a different kind of king. He's not just another warlord come with his army to trample everybody else. He's definitely a king, but he's not the kind of king that maybe people in Israel would have been expecting. He's not just a king of Judea like King David had been, but he's going to be a ruler of the whole world. And he's not going to rule through military power like so many kings and emperors and rulers today do, but he's going to rule as the Prince of Peace. So we can see that the donkey is a kind of a calculated move by Jesus. Earlier on in Mark chapter 8, we saw that when one of Jesus' disciples said, "You're the Messiah, Jesus," Jesus told him, "Keep that secret." But now, Jesus is openly proclaiming that he's the Messiah. By using the donkey, by accepting the palm waving thing, he's saying, "Yep, I'm the Messiah." And that's a kind of a challenge. That's a challenge to the people of Jerusalem. It's a challenge to King Herod, the puppet ruler of the Romans, and it's a challenge to the religious leaders of the day. Jesus knows what he's doing here by making this challenge, and he also knows what's coming. Where we are here on Palm Sunday in the book of Mark, a week later Jesus is going to be crucified. Jesus knows that's coming because he's already told his disciples in chapter 10 that that's what's going to happen. But why is it that people want to kill him? Moving a little bit on in chapter 11 of Mark, Jesus, once he's come into Jerusalem, it says here that Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. As he taught them, he said, "Is it not written, 'My house will be a house of prayer for all nations,' but you've made it a den of robbers." The chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. Another video.
Take these things hence! Make not my father's house an house of merchandise.
The Jewish temple in Jerusalem at that time was divided into several areas. The outermost area was called the Court of the Gentiles, which was where people who were not Jewish could come to pray. Now it seems that in that outer area there was a marketplace, and in that marketplace there were money changers. Now there was a tax that had to be paid to the temple, and the temple tax had to be paid in a specific currency called Tyrian shekels. If you were a Jew from somewhere else where they had a different money, then when you came to Jerusalem, you would have to exchange your local money into Tyrian shekels. No single currency back in those days. Just like if you want to pay taxes in Britain, you have to pay in pounds and not euros or dollars or anything else. So you had to change your money. So the money changers were there in the temple to change people's money so they could pay the tax. And just like today, they would take a fee, a percentage of the money being changed as their fee for changing the money. So that's why there were money changers in the temple. It also talks about those selling doves. Now, the Jewish law required an animal sacrifice to be made. The Old Testament Jewish law required an animal sacrifice to be made. A poor person might sacrifice a dove or some other kind of bird. A richer person might sacrifice a sheep or a goat. Now, the Old Testament law expected those animals to be part of your own flocks and herds. Most people were farmers, they would have had animals. But actually, if you lived a long way from Jerusalem, that might be a bit of a problem because you've got to pick up your animal, you've got to carry it all the way to Jerusalem. So what people would do is they would sell their animal for some money, take the money to Jerusalem, and then buy the animal when they got to Jerusalem. So that's why there's this market selling birds and sheep and goats in the temple so that people can have an animal to sacrifice. But actually, when God asked people to sacrifice the animals, it was more a sense of kind of actually something that you'd raised yourself, something that you cared about, something that you had put your heart and soul into, one of your own animals, one of your best animals, rather than just some animal you picked up in the market. But hey, it was so convenient. We like convenience when we're shopping, don't we? So the marketplace was really convenient. You could change your money, you could buy your animals, whatever you like, right there in the temple. And Jesus, he just goes off the deep end here somehow. In John's Gospel, it says he used a whip of cords to clear the market. He trashes the place. We saw him in the movie clip. He just trashes the place. What's going on? This is the only place in the whole Gospels where Jesus is shown as doing anything other than being completely peaceful. So what's going on? Does he hate banks, money changers? Does he hate farmers who are selling animals? No, not really. So several things. Firstly, this is about location. This is all happening in the courts of the Gentiles. This is the place where Gentiles, that's people who are not Jewish, that's probably almost every one of us, that's the place to come to pray in the temple. But these people have filled it up with a marketplace. Jesus says the temple is not a place for money making, for merchandise. And it would have been full of sheep dung and goat dung as well. Secondly, Jesus has a problem with this because it's about exploitation. The people coming to pray, coming to pay their temple tax, coming to make their sacrifice, they're kind of a captive market, really, aren't they? It's Passover, so maybe they put the prices up, double the price at Passover, because people got nowhere else to go. There's nothing else they can do. The traders can probably charge what they liked. And the third thing is that the temple authorities, the people who ran the temple, they could totally have cleared out that market themselves if they'd have wanted to, if they thought it was important, but they didn't. And why is that? Probably they were in on it as well. So maybe the temple rulers rented out space in the temple for the stalls, for your market traders. You know, you can have a double slot if you've got sheep and goats. They were probably making money off the thing. In the next chapter, chapter 12, which we'll cover next week, we see that Jesus criticizes the leaders of the temple, the leaders of the Jewish religion, for using their position to get wealth and to become corrupt. Those rulers would have been collaborating with the Romans. This might all seem a bit weird, having some kind of marketplace inside a church. This is a picture of the outside of the church here. Imagine that Mike set up a branch of Thomas Cook in the lobby so that you could change your money to have something good to put in the collection. That would be a bit weird, wouldn't it? Thomas Cook, they're defunct now, but hey. I even found a site called Quote Goat. So I was thinking, can I order a goat for sacrificing? Don't know. Anyway. So, the priests and the teacher of the law heard this, Jesus basically criticizing for saying, my house should be a house of prayer for all nations, Gentiles as well as Jews, but he made it a den of robbers. So the chief priests and teacher of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, that's kill Jesus, for they feared him, for the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. So Jesus is really kind of roiling things up. He's ridden in on a donkey, claimed to be the king, the Messiah. He's now trashed the money-making ventures of the people running the temple. So what happens next? While Jesus was walking in the temple courts, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders came to him. And they said, "By what authority are you doing these things?" they asked. "And who gave you authority to do this?" Jesus replied, "I will ask you one question. Answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I'm doing these things. So, John's baptism, was it from heaven or of human origin? Tell me." They, that's the priests, discussed it among themselves and says, "If we say from heaven, he will ask, 'Well, why didn't you believe him?' But if we say from human origin," they feared the people because everyone held that John was really a prophet. So they answered Jesus, "We don't know." And Jesus said, "Well, neither will I tell you by what authority I'm doing these things." So what's going on here? Let's unpack it a bit. The John here that's being talked about is John the Baptist. So in Mark chapter 1, we saw him come to Israel, and then he would baptize people in the River Jordan, a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. And I'm sure we're going to hear a little bit about baptism, what it means, a little bit later on. John the Baptist told everybody, "Prepare the way for the Lord and make straight paths for him." And he's talking about Jesus there. He's predicting that Jesus is coming. And Jesus himself had been baptized by John the Baptist. Now, the chief priests, the teacher of law, they're really in a bit of a bind here because they don't want to say that John the Baptist was from God because it's like, well, why didn't you believe him then? Why don't you accept Jesus as being from God as well? And they don't want to say, oh, he's just a guy, just a dude, because then the people will really hate them because the people all believe that John the Baptist is from God and therefore that Jesus is from God as well. So they resort to the favourite question of stroppy bureaucrats: "Who told you you could do this?" Jesus dodges their question very cleverly by saying, was it from heaven, was it from human origin? We can see that the answers of the Jewish leaders are kind of pragmatic, they're kind of political. They don't seem to care what the correct answer to the question is. Because the question is John the Baptist from God? And therefore, is Jesus from God? But the rulers, the priests and thieves, they're like, well, if we say this, it'll be that, and if we say this, it'll be that. And they don't really seem to care what the right answer is, what the true answer is. They only seem to care about how this question is going to play out for them, how their own political position is going to be affected by this. So eventually they just hide from the question and say they don't know. Because actually maybe they do know the answer and they're just really afraid of what the answer should be. So this is the question that effectively Jesus puts to the temple rulers of that day. And it's kind of actually the tricky question that Jesus asks everybody. Who do you say that Jesus is? Who do you say that I am? Asked Jesus. Now we saw in chapter 8 of Mark a couple of weeks ago, Jesus and his disciples moving around. Jesus said, who do people say that I am? He's asking his disciples here, and the disciples say, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, who's another prophet, some say some other prophet. What about you, Jesus says? Who do you say that I am? And Peter, who's one of the disciples, Simon Peter, he says, Jesus, you are the Messiah. So the disciples, they know what's going on. By entering Jerusalem on the donkey, Jesus is claiming to be the Messiah. He's claiming to be the chosen one, the Prince of Peace. Now, the common people of Jerusalem, they recognize Jesus' claim, and by waving the palm branches, they're saying, yep, we think you're the coming king, we think you're the Messiah. We just seen the disciples know what the answer to the question is, because Peter says, yep, Jesus, you're the Messiah. Those with a lot to lose, maybe who've got some money investments in the current system, some political investment in the current system, they weasel, they prevaricate, and they avoid the question. But this question still stands for us today. It stands for me. Who do I say that Jesus is? And actually it stands for you. Who do you say that Jesus is? Some of you will be aware of a guy called C.S. Lewis. He wrote the Narnia stories, Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe and all those things. You may have come across those before. They've been films as well. C.S. Lewis put it like this. He said, a man who was merely a man, he's talking about Jesus here, a man who was merely a man and said the sort of thing that Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic, on the level of the man who says he is a poached egg, or he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man, Jesus, was and is the Son of God, or else he's a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at Jesus and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. And you may have heard this same conundrum expressed as Jesus is either mad, bad, or God. The same question that Jesus put to the people of Jerusalem, he puts to us today. Who will you say that Jesus is? Is he some madman, a bit confused about who he is and about whether he's God? Is he a deceiver, somebody who's just tricking people into doing a whole bunch of things? Or is he, as he claims, actually God? I'll leave that with you to have a think about.